So these next few weeks, we are going to be spending some time talking about summer love and the love of people. So today is going to be about loving our friends. So when I say that about a friend, can you think of a friend you would consider your best friend? Now, I'm not talking about a partner or spouse or anything like that. Who is your best friend? Someone who's been through it all. And I'm talking the good, the bad, and especially the ugly. You know what I mean? That ugly time, those things that you go through. You know, I have friends. I got lots of friends. I got some I would consider very good friends. And it took me a moment as I was writing this message thinking about that one friend. And it came to me instantly. I really shouldn't have never hesitated at all. And that's my friend Tina. Tina has been there with me. We actually met when we were 14 years old. We were up in Michigan, and we were in a community band that was basically built out of the local high school students that were in band, involved in that. And there were some retirees who still loved to play their instruments, and we would travel around the United States playing in this community band that was a replica of the first Marine band. So we played, and we were on the road all the time. I met Tina, and we became friends instantly. We had the same kind of personality. We bounced things off of each other. We were silly together. We just were good friends. And we would show up for each other's band concerts, or even when our schools played against each other in sports, we would, go back and forth in fun and all that. So we were just, all the time we were involved in each other's lives. We were always spending the night at each other's houses. And if we weren't together, we were on the phones together. And this was way back in the day when we all had like one phone in our home. So there was always a time limit. Okay, girls, it's been an hour now. Time to get off the phone. So when we graduated high school, we went to different colleges. But we made sure to visit at least once or twice a month each other at our different colleges. I chose the hospitality career field, and moved to, after college, I moved to a resort in Florida. And Tina majored in theater, and she stayed in Michigan, though, and she worked in community theater. She'd direct plays, she'd write plays, and she would be part of the plays in that. So there was a few years that we kind of drifted apart. But yet when I would go back to Michigan to visit family, I would always make sure to visit, and we would get back together. And it was that type of friendship that you could never tell there was any time apart. We would pick up right where we left off. It was right there. So when I moved back to Florida, to the Clearwater area, it didn't take Tina long to say, you know what? I'm joining you. I'm leaving Michigan, and I'm going to go to Florida. So we were roommates for a few years, and as our time together, she was the bridesmaid at my wedding, and she threw me a baby shower when I was pregnant with my son, and then when I was married and our son, and we moved back to Michigan in 2004, and a few years later, Tina moved back to Michigan. It was great. We were together again. We were seeing each other again. She was that type of friend when I really needed to talk to someone, when I was just like, I want to go see that movie. And I knew I couldn't get my husband to go see it and that. I knew I could call Tina and say, hey, Tina, want to go see that movie? And instantly we'd make plans to do that. She'd always want to go to lunch, or she'd always want to do what I want to do. We'd go see plays together, and we all would do these things. And when I told her I was moving to Vegas, she was happy for me. And she says, I can't wait to visit. I don't know if she'll move here, but she says, I can't wait to visit. It was this friend. We had this great friendship. And I do look forward to when she does visit that you all get to meet her. But here's the thing about friendships. We have all made mistakes. Did you know that? We've all made mistakes in our friendships. It's been a time or two when we mess things up. And I'll even go far to say that we failed our friends a time or two, as well as they have failed us, right? And I can't remember any particular time that Tina and I ever had this huge disagreement. We didn't fight. We haven't fought. We just haven't done that. But I know there's been times when I've been hurt by something she said, or better yet, not said. And vice versa. I know that I've hurt her in something that I've said, or maybe didn't say. And I'm sure many of us have had complicated friendships. I know there's people that I meet, and I think, like, in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, like, gosh, I can't wait to be their friend. They just seem so cool. I can't wait to get to know them. And then I get to know them. You know where I'm going, right? Oh, maybe it's good we say acquaintances, right? There's just those people that it just happens that way. And maybe some of us have experienced the difficulty of forming or even keeping friends. But just like God meets us where we're at, we are supposed to be called, well, we are called to meet people where they're at. And that's like this gospel reading today we heard from John 21. You see, it's a powerful story. It's a story that we hear. It's a story about love, friendship, and even forgiveness. And just a little background to this passage. In John chapter 13, Jesus was going to Jerusalem, and he took the 12 disciples, and he said to them, we're going to go up to Jerusalem. And the Son of Man will be betrayed. And he's going to be betrayed to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. And they're going to condemn him. And they're going to put him to death. And they're going to turn him over to the Gentiles. And they're going to mock him. They're going to flog and crucify him. So after Jesus shared his limited time with the disciples, Peter, good old Peter. I love Peter. Do you all love Peter? I love Peter. I just want that known. Because Peter innocently, loudly insists that he would never let Jesus down. Peter went even so far to say, I will lay down my life for you. And Jesus answered, will you really give your life for me? The truth is, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So then we move into chapter 18, where we watch helplessly poor Peter. He's trying hard. He loves Jesus so much, and he tries to live in his declarations, but he fails. Can you feel that? He fails. And to give Peter some credit, though, he did follow Jesus after he was arrested. And he even went as far to go in the high priest's courtyard. But he stayed back. He didn't let everybody know who he was. He hid. And it's here that this girl asks him, she says, you're not one of those disciples of his, are you? And automatically Peter says, I am not. He denies it 3 times. 3 times he's asked, and 3 times he denies, no, I don't know who this guy is. You see, in Jesus' hour of need, Peter denies Jesus 3 times. And then the rooster crows, just like Jesus predicted. And after denying Christ, the writer of Mark tells us that Peter broke down and he wept. So that brings us to today's gospel reading of John. It takes place after the resurrection, and Jesus meets the disciples at the beach, and he made them breakfast. And we heard that the disciples didn't recognize him right away, but they knew. They began to know. And the reading doesn't really give us exact details on how this conversation happened between Jesus and Peter, but I would like to think, as much as Jesus loves Peter, that he maybe took him aside. Let's take a walk. Let's go. Because this is going to be their first conversation they had after this time, this hard time. And I can imagine that Peter is just beside himself. Wouldn't you be? Yeah, Jesus, I denied you 3 times. So yeah, let's go have a walk and a talk. Yeah, let's see how that works out. You got to imagine just how much that is hard. And then Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? And 2 times Peter answers, Lord, you know I love you. I love you deeply as a friend. And then the 3rd time, and Jesus asked Peter, and by this time we're hearing Peter is hurt. Maybe he's also embarrassed, wouldn't you think? He may be a little embarrassed, but he's hurt because Jesus asked him again, Peter, do you really love me as deeply as a friend? And Peter responds, Lord, you know all things, and you know that I love you so deeply as a friend. And I think Jesus used this opportunity, though, to encourage Peter about his responsibilities. So by asking Peter, do you love me 3 times, Jesus was emphasizing the importance of Peter's love and solid obedience to Jesus as necessary, because Peter had some work to do, and God had some plans for Peter, right? Just like us, God has plans for us. But in hearing all this and asking, do you love me, that's when Jesus begins to question. Did you notice? He questions Peter about his love for him. And each time Peter answers in an affirmative, and Jesus follows with the command for Peter to feed his sheep. See, Jesus' meaning is that if Peter truly loves his master, he is to shepherd and care for those who belong to Christ. That's us. And Jesus' words reveal Peter's role as the leader of the new church, the body of Christ. And there in Jerusalem, Peter was going to be responsible. He's going to be responsible for spreading the gospel. Also showing love to others. And Jesus wanted to make sure that Peter understood this vital change, and he was tasking him in the ultimate reason for it, to follow him and to glorify God. And another part of the gospel I want to point out is that contrast of the word love. 3 times. Do you love me? And in verses 15 and 16, Peter responded with using that Greek word agape, which means unconditional love. There's something about that, unconditional love, no matter what. Unconditional love. And both times Peter responded with, yes, Lord, you know I love you. But then he responded, you know I love you, using the Greek word phileo, which means more of a brotherly friendship kind of love. And you see what Jesus was trying to get Peter to understand, that he must love Jesus unconditionally. If he was going to be the leader of the church, if he was going to move on and do all that God created him to do, he needed to love unconditionally. So that 3rd time Jesus asked, do you love me? Peter was using that type of love, brotherly love. And Peter again responds, Lord, you know I love you, again and again. But the point in the different Greek words for love seems to be that Jesus was stretching Peter. And I'm going to stop there. Have you ever been stretched by God? Has God ever nudged you and just kind of like made you do something you weren't sure, like, what in the world am I doing this for? Can you imagine how Peter was feeling at this moment? He didn't realize he was being stretched, but God, Jesus was stretching Peter. He wanted him to move from this brotherly love to this unconditional love. He wanted him to understand this love. It's deep. It's powerful. So, who? And you're wondering, where is she going with this now? Who has transformed you to love like that? Besides Jesus and that. Do you have that friend that's kind of helped you transform you, to change you, to move you in that? Because that's what Jesus was being to Peter, this friend, and telling him, you need to learn to love. We need to stretch you. We need to do that. And we need to make you move to this love, unconditional love. And when I think about my friend Tina, I think about the ways that she's transformed me, and I think I've transformed her through this relationship that we've had. We've matured, hopefully, since our 14-year-old silliness. We've matured, and we've had different life experiences. And we've kind of taught each other things that we've learned by the ways of our lives and the people that we've met. We both went through a death of a parent. I lost my father, and a few months later, she lost her mother. We had career changes. She started a children's theater in Florida and then in Michigan, and we would turn to each other constantly. I'm really thinking about doing this. What do you think? What do you think? And then I went into ministry. I had this call. I was unsure. I'm like, Tina, what do you think? And she was supportive. She didn't understand it, but she was supportive. And when we've done these different things, our lives took different paths, different directions. And I married and had a child. And Tina didn't get married, but she had to move back to Michigan to become a caretaker. She had the theater business, and she was a caretaker for her parents. And I have to say that awkwardness started to happen between us. I went into ministry, and I would call and tell her things that were happening in the church, and she didn't quite get it. And I felt us drifting. She didn't know how to act. She didn't want to come to church things because she didn't know I didn't do this, because she never grew up in the church. She would go to Sunday school and be dropped off at the church and picked up afterwards, but she never went further than that. So this was new to her. And her best friend was going in this crazy direction, and she was afraid she was going to lose me. And I, on the other end, was afraid I was going to lose her. So it took us a while before she was comfortable bringing up the topic, and we discussed it, and I explained to her that I'm still that same 14-year-old you met that we bought the beanie hats with the propellers, and we would sit and make goofy faces and take pictures and that. I'm still that person. I'm still there. It's just that God called me in a different direction. God called me to learn about unconditional love. God called me to go in this other direction. And I had to explain to her, I'm not your pastor. I'm your friend. I'm still your friend. No matter what, I'm not your pastor. So please treat me like you've treated me before. Make fun of me. Make fun of the way I talk. Make fun of the way I chew my food. Go back to being that friend. Be there. And I have to tell you, after talking it over, it felt like this weight was lifted from both of our shoulders. I love our friendship. And I would have hated for something to change that, for it to be different. And I have to admit, I was hurt. But I understood where she was coming from. And when we finally sat down, honesty really brought us closer together. So I can't even imagine through the hurt that Jesus must have felt when the so-called disciple Peter denied him 3 times. What I went through with my friend was nothing compared to what that must have felt like. Denied him 3 times. And I know many of us say that Jesus already knew it was going to happen and all that because Jesus knew it all, but let's be honest. It still had to hurt. And I'm sure some of you have experienced awkwardness in a relationship. But let me ask, did you ever get over it? Did you ever reach out and find out what was wrong? Did you ever try to fix that awkwardness? Were you or the other person gracious like Jesus? Forgiving? Do you still have that friendship? Because a lot of times when we have those lifelong friendships, we go through different stages of life, right? So how has that friendship transformed you? Because friendships are important. Jesus had friends, right? We just heard the 12 disciples. But he had friends, and everyone, I think, who encountered Jesus thought of him as a friend, right? Except for probably the religious leaders. They didn't think too highly of him. But I just imagine Jesus having that personality. If he would walk in this room today, we would all flock to him because he would have that personality to connect with each and every one of us. Friendships are important. And I think we can learn so much by imitating Christ. And that's loving unconditionally. And not just the people that we know, but people we don't know. People that we see in the grocery stores, people that we see wherever it is that we are at. So what I've been praying about this week is asking you this question. How can we as a church imitate Christ in our community? How can we show unconditional love to our community, our neighbors? What would it look like to get out of our everyday social circles and become friends with those that we don't even know who's out there yet? What does that look like? Jesus told Peter, feed my sheep. And I generally believe that Jesus is also talking to us, and he's saying, you know what? Green Valley United Methodist Church, feed my sheep. Find those sheep that need to be fed. We need to do that. And I love being here these last few weeks that I've been here and hearing about the different groups and that meet here at the church and the ministries that are already happening, the missions that are happening. That's awesome. That's exciting. And you should all be excited about all the good work that you're doing. But I'm a bit curious because I want to know, when was the last time you invited someone new to join your group? When was the last time you reached out to a friend who was struggling and prayed for them or invited them out for coffee and introduced them to some other friends that you may have? When's the last time you asked a stranger for a cup of coffee? Join me for a cup of coffee. Who is someone at your job or in your neighborhood who may need a friend? How can you start building a friendship that turns into unconditional love with someone we don't know yet? And how can we become the church that reaches out to others in this community so that they can experience unconditional love that Jesus taught Peter to have toward his sheep? So you ready to be the church that's the light in this community? It's a beautiful building. People drive by. I've heard people say, oh, you're at that pretty church. Yes. But wouldn't it be nice to hear people say, man, you're at that church that gets it. You're at that church that shows unconditional love. Wouldn't that be amazing? So that's my prayer for you this week. My prayer for you is to dig into this Gospel of John, to read about this relationship between Jesus and Peter, and start practicing unconditional love, especially to those you don't know. Are you ready to do it? Are you willing to do it? Let's go be that church. Amen? Amen.